Adair Balogun adjusted her blouse for the third time, tugging it gently over the barely there swell of her belly. 5 months in, and still she managed to keep it hidden. Barely. The mirrored walls of OK Realty's Victoria Island Tower reflected back a woman in control. But control was a fragile costume. Inside her tiny cubicle on the executive floor, the scent of hot coffee mingled with chilled air conditioning. Behind the double glass doors, Damila Okchukwa's office loomed, silent, minimalist, and merciless. The man himself hadn't said more than 5 words to her all week. He never did unless it involved figures or files. It was as if that night never happened. That night, blurred between grief and gin, had left a mark far deeper than she'd intended. He didn't remember. She couldn't forget. And now, she carried the one truth she dared not speak. Miss Balogun, his voice cut through the air like cold steel. She turned instantly, file in hand, heart hammering. "Yes, sir?" He didn't look up from his tablet. "Reschedule the Maber Holdings call to 4 p.m. And tell Kohler I need the revised Lecky blueprint on my desk in an hour." "Yes, sir," she echoed, masking her nausea with a quick nod. Back at her desk, she took a long sip of water and closed her eyes. Every day was a balancing act, between secrets and survival, between professionalism and the panic fluttering beneath her ribs. Outside, Lagos buzzed with noise, ambition, and chaos. Inside, Adej would move like a shadow through glass, efficient, silent, invisible. But glass cracks, and secrets don't stay buried forever. It happened 1 month after Mr. Okchukwa's father died. The office had emptied after a late strategy meeting. Rain drummed against the windows, thunder humming like grief. Adejwa had stayed back, waiting for her bolt to arrive. Dammy was still in his office, tie loosened, shirt rumpled, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're still here?" he'd asked, surprising her. She nodded, waiting out the rain. He nodded too, eyes shadowed, and gestured toward the whiskey. "Want one?" She should have said no, but instead, she sat across from him, the usual barrier, titles, tasks, expectations, washed away in silence. He spoke of his father, the pressure, the legacy, the anger. She listened, offering her presence more than words. 1 drink became 2. Laughter softened edges. Then something shifted. In the hush between thunderclaps, their hands brushed, eyes met, and for one fleeting moment, she saw something raw in him. Ache, loneliness. She leaned in first. There were no declarations, no promises, just a night tangled in blurred boundaries and unspoken grief. By morning, he was gone. A car had picked him up before sunrise. The Dammy who returned to the office wore a colder face. That night was never mentioned. Adejwa kept quiet. She told herself it meant nothing. But when the test showed 2 lines weeks later, the silence around it became deafening. She'd thought of quitting. She even drafted the email. But with rent due, a baby on the way, and nowhere else to go, she'd stayed. Now, every look he gave her, or didn't, cut deeper than words. She hadn't planned to fall. But in one vulnerable moment, she had, and now she was falling again, this time into a life she hadn't prepared for. Dammy couldn't explain it, but something about Adejwa was off. She moved slower these days, her steps measured, her face paler. She no longer laughed at Kohler's bad jokes or offered her usual quiet nods when he passed the desk. She wore looser blouses, and twice now he'd caught her wincing and clutching her side when she thought no one was looking. But when he asked if she was okay, her answer was always the same. "I'm fine, sir." He hated that response. It was too practiced, too careful. Just like her. Back in his office, Dammy tried to shake the growing unease. He wasn't a man who dug into people's lives. Boundaries kept everything cleaner, safer. But Adejwa's silence was beginning to itch at his conscience. That afternoon, during a client meeting, she staggered briefly while pouring coffee. The cup clattered against the saucer, spilling onto her wrist. She quickly muttered an apology and cleaned it, but Dammy saw her hand tremble. "She doesn't look well," the client whispered, once she'd left the room. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Later that evening, he stood by the glass wall of his penthouse, phone in hand. He'd dialed her number but hadn't pressed call. What would he say? That he noticed something was wrong? That he cared? He tossed the phone onto the couch. Dammy wasn't used to caring. Caring opened doors to things he had locked away years ago. But as he stared out at the Lagos night, lights flickering like secrets waiting to be uncovered, he couldn't shake the image of Adejwa's eyes. Tired, guarded, full of something she wouldn't name. And for the first time in a long time, he wanted to know what she was hiding. The call came from the office just after noon. Adejwa had collapsed in the hallway, her breathing shallow, a hand pressed to her stomach. Kimi had rushed over, frantic, and insisted she be taken to a private hospital in Ikoyi. When Dammy arrived at the hospital, his face was set like stone, but his fingers wouldn't stop twitching. He hated hospitals. The sterile smell, the helplessness, the waiting. He pushed past the nurses until he found the doctor. "She's pregnant," the man said calmly, reviewing her chart. "Roughly 5 months. Likely stress-induced fainting." 5 months. Dammy's stomach dropped. He did the math. That night, the rain, the blurred memory that haunted him more than he admitted. He clenched his jaw. "She didn't tell me." The doctor raised a brow. "You're the father." Dammy didn't answer. He entered the room quietly. Adejwa lay on the bed, and in her arm, eyes closed, her cheeks pale. She stirred when he called her name. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, tight. She turned her face away. "You didn't remember. I didn't think it mattered." "Mattered?" he echoed, stepping closer. "You're carrying my child, and you, decided to keep it to yourself." She opened her eyes, defiant despite her weakness. "You didn't ask. You disappeared that morning and never looked back. I handled it." Silence stretched between them like broken glass. "I would have done something," he said finally. She laughed bitterly. "Exactly. Something. A check? A house? A lawyer? I didn't want to be managed. Dammy, I wanted to be seen." For a moment, he had no response. Just the sound of the heart monitor and her quiet breathing between them. And for the first time, Dammy Okchukwu realized this wasn't about power. It was about presence. 3 days passed. Dammy didn't return to the hospital. Adejwa checked herself out the morning of the 3rd day, ignoring the nurse's protest. She didn't want another pitying glance or another bouquet sign from OKE Realty. He hadn't come. That was all the answer she needed. Back in Surulere, the cracked tiles and distant hum of Danfo horns felt grounding. Mama Tainu watched her from the kitchen doorway, concern heavy in her eyes. But Adejwa said nothing. She was tired of explaining herself, tired of shrinking to fit someone else's silence. Later that night, her phone buzzed. It was him. "Dammy, I want to take care of you. Of the baby." "Adejwa, too late. I've taken care of myself already." The typing bubble flickered and disappeared. No reply. She dropped the phone and let the tears come, quiet, exhausted, bitter, not from heartbreak, but from clarity. She had expected too much from a man trained to build walls instead of homes. Across the city, in his penthouse, Dammy stared at the unread message. He had drafted contracts, thought about offering her an apartment, a monthly allowance, security, solutions that made sense to him. But none of it felt enough. None of it felt human. He saw her face every time he closed his eyes, the way she looked at him in that hospital bed, not with hatred, but with something colder, disappointment. And that was a moment something cracked. Not because he had lost control, but because, for the first time in his life, control meant nothing. The labor started just after midnight. Kimi rushed Adejwa to the private maternity ward in Iko Hospital, her voice a mix of panic and pep talks. The ward was quiet, dimly lit, with gospel music playing faintly from a distant speaker. Outside, the Lagos rain fell steady, familiar, soothing. Adejwa gritted her teeth through the pain. No epidural, no partner pacing outside, just her and the strength she had grown into. By dawn, her daughter arrived, small, warm, and loud. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she held the tiny bundle close, her fingers trembling. She whispered the name she'd chosen in secret for months. Mo NK. "I have found something to cherish." No one else came. She had told no one beyond Kimi. She didn't want apologies. She didn't want arrangements. What she wanted was this moment. Undiluted. Hers. Back in Lecky, Dammy stared at his reflection, dark circles beneath his eyes. He hadn't slept since Adejwa's message. He'd driven to her flat once, parked outside, and left without knocking. Cowardice. Pride. Shame. He didn't know which was worse. When the news finally came, from Kimi, blunt and sharp as ever, he felt winded. She gave birth. She's fine. The baby's fine. They don't need anything. He nodded, quiet, broken open. Later that night, he sat in the study that had once belonged to his father. On the desk, the envelope he never sent, the contract, the keys, the guilt. He picked up a pen instead, not to draft a deal, but to write something real. Dammy stood outside the Surulere flat for a long time before knocking. The air smelled of fried plantain and wet sand. Laughter from a nearby compound drifted into the evening light. Mama Tainu opened the door, eyes sharp beneath a jewel. "She's not here to be fixed with flowers and rich man regret," she said without greeting. "I didn't bring flowers," Dammy replied softly. "Just this." He held out a plain brown envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Adele sat on a low bench beside a hibiscus bush when her grandmother handed it to her. She stared at Dammy's handwriting, unsure whether to open it. Then, slowly, she did. "I was raised to build things, walls, companies, futures, but no one taught me how to build trust. That night, I wasn't thinking. Afterward, I pretended it didn't happen because I was scared of what it meant. Now I know what matters. The silence hurt you. My absence hurt you. I don't want to manage you, Adejwa. I want to meet you where you are. If you'll let me." Dammy. Her hands trembled as she folded the page. Later that weekend, she took Morin-K to the park near Freedom Park. Sunlight filtered through almond trees. Lagos life bustled around them. Dammy appeared, hesitant, holding a book wrapped in brown paper. "I figured she might like stories," he said. Adejwa raised a brow. "She can't read yet." He smiled, genuinely. "Then I'll read to her." She studied him. There were no suits, no promises. Just a man finally showing up. She nodded to the empty bench beside her. He's Saturday. Gently. They didn't need to start over. They just needed to begin. The rooftop of the community center in Surulere was quiet, painted in the soft glow of the setting sun. A low table held a tray of zobo, chin-chin, and 2 baby rattles. Wind rustled the drying laundry on lines nearby. Adair was sat with Morin-K in her lap, wrapped in a yellow anchor blanket, eyes wide and alert. Dammy stood a few feet away, unsure whether to sit. He wasn't the same man who'd walked corporate halls in silence. This one looked human, creased linen shirt, tired eyes, hope in his voice. "I'm not here to rewrite the past," he said, voice low. "I just want to be in the pages ahead. If you'll let me." Adejwa looked at her daughter, who gripped her finger tightly. "I didn't need you to rescue me," she said. "I know," he replied. "You rescued yourself." They sat in quiet. The Lagos skyline shimmered in the distance, key corns mixing with a hum of life below. Then Adejwa slid over slightly, just enough for him to sit beside her. He did, carefully. Morin-K stared at him with wide, curious eyes. He reached out, slow and unsure, until a tiny hand found his. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a contract. It was a choice, one made with open eyes and unburdened hearts. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, casting the city in golden light, Adejwa leaned her head softly on Dammy's shoulder. They were still learning, still healing. But under the Lagos sky, something fragile, honest, and new had begun.